Tonight on PBS News Weekend, high-stakes talks between the United States and Iran begin as they discuss sanctions and the future of Iran's advancing nuclear program. Then we investigate why more and more patients are getting hit with unexpected fees when they go to the doctor's office, and the joys and challenges of raising children as a parent with disabilities.
Admitting that disabled people exist and that we make good parents is also admitting that none of this is promised and all bodies are fragile and all bodies have needs.
Major funding for PBS News Weekend has been provided by the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. And friends of the NewsHour. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm John Yang. In Oman today, the United States and Iran appear to have taken the first steps that could lead to a new agreement to limit Iran's nuclear activities and lift U.S. economic sanctions. On social media, the Omani foreign minister who mediated today's indirect talks said they took place in a friendly atmosphere conducive to bridging viewpoints. The White House described the meeting as very positive and constructive. And the Iranian foreign minister said the two sides briefly interacted when their paths crossed at the end of today's session and that they will meet again next Saturday. Karim Sajidpour is a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. He focuses on Iran and U.S. Middle East policy. Karim, a little brief encounter, it sounds like in a hallway, agreement to meet again. Is this about as much as one could hope out of this meeting?
The fact that they've agreed on a second meeting, I think, is as much anyone could have hoped for, but our expectations should be realistic. This is not a negotiation about a U.S.-Iran rapprochement, a Nixon to China moment, normalization of relations. This is really whether the two sides can agree on something which limits Iran's nuclear program, and that's going to be a tall order.
President Trump says he wants a stronger agreement than the one President Obama got. Is that possible?
I think that's going to be very difficult for President Trump because when he pulled out of the deal in 2018, Iran essentially put its foot on the gas. And if you think of getting a nuclear bomb as a 26-mile marathon, Iran is in mile 25 right now. And so the big challenge President Trump is going to have is reversing Iran's program significantly. And if he's not able to do that, he's going to have to answer to two constituencies. One are congressional Republicans, and the other is Israel. And whether those two constituencies will accept Trump signing off on a nuclear deal that was weaker than the Obama deal, which he abrogated.
The Iranian Foreign Minister, Abbas Araghchi, talked a little bit about the end of this meeting about another of Mr. Trump's goals. And let's listen to a little bit of that.
The American side also said their aim is to reach an agreement in the shortest possible time. But of course, this won't be easy and will require necessary will from both sides.
The first agreement took a while to negotiate. Is there a potential pitfall in making speed a priority?
These negotiations are not going to be about the art of the deal. They're going to be about the science of verification. These are not theatrical discussions. These are very technical discussions. And here, there is a huge imbalance between the Iranian side and the American side, in that the Iranian side, you have several Iranian diplomats who have been thinking deeply and negotiating these issues for 2 decades. And on the U.S. side, you have President Trump's friend, Steve Witkoff, who's been thinking about this for perhaps 2 months. And so it's true that America obviously has far more leverage over Iran than they have, but there's an imbalance in terms of expertise when it comes to the negotiating teams.
Why now? What's motivating each side to come to the table now?
Well, Iran is one of the most sanctioned nations in the world. It's a very deeply unpopular regime domestically. It's been humiliated over the last several months in the region. Israel has taken out several of Iran's proxies, and Israel took out Iran's military air defense systems. So militarily, Iran is very vulnerable. On the U.S. side, Trump has always made clear that he's keen on reaching a deal, and the fact that Iran is kind of inching towards nuclear weaponization has obviously given him a much greater sense of urgency.
You mentioned the economy, Iran's economy, the verge of Iran getting a nuclear weapon. What else is at stake here?
If you really break this down, you have two countries ruled by very different leaders, right? President Trump likes the theatrics of negotiations and doing deals, and actually has been clear about the fact that he wants to resolve U.S.-Iran relations. On the Iranian side, you have Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, arguably the longest-serving dictator in the world at age 85. If he wrote a book, it wouldn't be The Art of the Deal, it's The Art of Resistance. That's something he's prided himself on for 4 decades, is being hostile to the United States. The identity of the Islamic Republic of Iran is contingent on death to America, right? So for him, it's swallowing a lot of pride for his diplomats to sit down directly and negotiate with the United States. And I think there's really an imbalance of expectations here because, as I mentioned, even President Trump's statement today made clear that he wants to see these negotiations lead to a resumption of relations between America and Iran, whereas Ayatollah Khamenei has much more narrow goals, a temporary tactical compromise in order for him to get sanctions relief and avert an Israeli strike on Iran.
You mentioned Israel. They are not at the table. They see a nuclear-powered Iran as an existential threat. They say they want a total elimination of their nuclear program. What role are they going to play, even though they're not at the table?
Well, I think Israel obviously has a very close relationship with President Trump. They're going to make their concerns very well known, not only to the White House, but to Congress and the U.S. media. And we've already seen statements from people within the Trump administration, like his National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, saying that the outcome here should be the so-called Libya model, which is a total dismantlement of Iran's program. And so it already appears that within the Trump administration, there's different views about what the end game should be. And Israel is obviously going to be putting the thumb on the scale for a much more hawkish outcome.
Karim Sadjadpour, thank you very much.
Thank you, John.
Also in the Middle East, Israeli forces said they have now completely encircled Rafah in southern Gaza. For days, the military has warned hundreds of thousands of people in the area to evacuate. The IDF is expanding activities in Gaza, where military operations resumed nearly a month ago. Israel says it won't stop fighting there until the remaining 59 hostages are freed, but Hamas has said it can't guarantee their safety while operations are ongoing. The Trump administration is excluding smartphones, laptops, and other electronics from tariffs. The move caps a week of ratcheting up tariffs on products from China as part of the widening trade war. Chinese tariffs now total 145%. The exemptions were in guidance that Customs and Border Patrol issued last night. It didn't give a reason for the change. Among the items retroactively excluded, memory chips, flat panel displays, and hard drives. It spares U.S. tech companies like Apple and Dell from import duties that threaten to upend their businesses and raise prices for consumers. President Trump says he's in good shape and feeling well after getting his annual physical at Walter Reed Medical Center. At 78, Mr. Trump was the oldest in U.S. history to be sworn in as president. He spent 5 hours at the medical center on Friday. Later, he gave reporters aboard Air Force One his self-assessment and took a swipe at his predecessor.
Overall, I think I felt I was in very good shape. Good heart, a good soul, very good soul. And I wanted to be a little different than Biden. I took a cognitive test, and I don't know when to tell you other than I got every answer right.
Despite multiple promises during the campaign to release medical records, the official report from this visit will provide the first detailed look at Mr. Trump's health since 2018 and the first information of any kind since an assassination attempt last year. The CDC says there are confirmed cases of measles in half the country, more than 700 in 25 states. That's more than double all of last year's reported cases. Since January, the vast majority of people with measles have been in Texas, 541. The CDC says there may be more infections nationwide since it doesn't count cases that are under investigation. Still to come on PBS News Weekend, why a growing number of patients are finding extra fees on their doctor's bills, and how the disabled community can provide valuable lessons about parenting.
This is PBS News Weekend from the David M. Rubenstein studio at WETA in Washington, home of the PBS NewsHour, weeknights on PBS.
The next time you go to the doctor's office, you may not know whether or not they're affiliated with a hospital system. If they are, your bill for a routine visit may include some surprising extra charges, fees that go to the hospital even if you never stepped a foot inside it. Special correspondent Megan Thompson has our report.
In 2016, Jess Ayers and her family moved from New Jersey back to her home state of Minnesota. Ayers set about making appointments with new doctors for her 3 children, especially her daughter, who needed regular eye exams.
She was diagnosed with strabismus, which is essentially a lazy eye.
So they took her to an ophthalmology practice at this clinic in Minneapolis that had been recommended by their old doctor in New Jersey. After the checkup, Ayers was surprised to receive 2 bills, one for the physician's fee and one for hospital charges totaling $176.
It was very puzzling and frustrating.
Had you gone to a hospital?
No, we had not gone to a hospital. Right. This was a doctor's office.
Ayers discovered the doctor's office was part of a hospital system called mHealth Fairview, one of the largest health systems in the state. So Ayers, who works in healthcare communications, had to pay something called a facility fee.
I was dumbfounded because I'd never heard of it. And having worked in healthcare for a long time, I was taken aback.
She's not alone, says Christine Monahan, an expert on facility fees at Georgetown University's Center on Health Insurance Reforms.
Facility fees are particularly pernicious because they're these high, often surprising bills that are not really adequately covered by our insurance.
Monahan says hospitals have traditionally charged facility fees to help cover their overhead costs, but more and more, they're charging the fees for routine outpatient care.
2 things are at play. One is that hospitals are increasingly acquiring physician practices. More and more places you go to will be affiliated with a hospital.
In fact, between 2012 and 2024, the percentage of doctors employed by hospitals or health systems more than doubled to 55%, which helps explain why it seems more Americans are being charged.
But we're also seeing them more. Consumers are feeling them more because we're seeing deductibles increase in our insurance coverage. And so more and more you might be directly responsible.
Nationwide, insurance deductibles have increased by nearly 50% in the last decade. Jess Ayers' current insurance plan has a high deductible of $10,000 for her family of 5.
You know, there's a lot of those types of bills. They come in every which way. And it's a little bit like death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Buyer beware.
Caitlin Johnson of Minneapolis says she was prepared for a facility fee when she took her 8-year-old daughter for a panel of 40 allergy tests last summer at this mHealth Fairview clinic. But she was not prepared for how much the actual tests would cost.
The total they'd charged to insurance was $24,400. $24,000? Yes.
Insurance paid almost $19,000, and Johnson was left to pay more than $5,400.
I mean, what went through your head when you saw that bill? Shocked and really confused because, part of me felt like, how did I not know that this was such an expensive test?
It turns out it's actually not.
I'm just calling to see if I can get some pricing information.
Johnson called around to allergy clinics not affiliated with hospitals and asked about a panel of tests similar to what her daughter had.
Testing typically runs about $1,827.
Could run anywhere from $800 to $1,800.
And that's the price before insurance kicks in. Johnson thought her clinic had made a mistake, but they assured her they had not, saying there is a big difference between hospital pricing and freestanding clinic pricing. So now she's fighting the bill.
This test was outrageously expensive and seemed extremely out of line.
High prices, Christine Monahan says, are another consequence of hospitals consolidating and buying up independent practices. The larger they are, the more negotiating power they have with insurance companies.
The greater the market power that a hospital has, the higher prices they charge for their services.
High procedure prices and facility fees are helping drive up the cost of hospital care, which has been growing about twice as fast as inflation and outpacing physician services and prescription drugs.
What do they pay for?
To understand what's behind the surging prices, we spoke to Molly Smith of the American Hospital Association.
First and foremost, there is no place in the healthcare system like a hospital. We uniquely provide the highest level of care.
Smith says operating hospitals is expensive, with their round-the-clock emergency departments, top-of-the-line medical equipment, and highly trained specialists.
A patient walks into a doctor's office for routine care, and they're not using any of those hospital resources. So you can kind of understand why they would say, why am I paying for them? I'm not getting anything.
But I do think everyone needs to understand what it takes for hospitals and health systems to maintain access to care in their communities 24 hours a day. When you need your emergency department in the middle of the night, you need it to be open and available.
Smith says inflation has made it all the more expensive, and hospitals are not being reimbursed enough by insurers to cover all the costs.
Insurers, payers are squeezing providers to the point where they are no longer financially stable. For every dollar that a hospital spends on staff, on medical supplies, Medicare only reimburses them 82 cents. They have to make up that other 18 cents somewhere else.
But state legislatures are increasingly cracking down, saying that gap shouldn't be made up by raising costs for routine care.
We've seen 20 states nationwide take some type of action to regulate facility fee billing.
And when it comes to reining in prices for procedures, a bill proposed in New York State would be the first to cap prices at hospital outpatient clinics for people with commercial insurance. People like Caitlin Johnson, with her daughter's $24,000 allergy test. In a statement to PBS News Weekend, mHealth Fairview said, "We understand that healthcare billing can be complex, and we recognize that the cost of care is a significant concern for many individuals and families."
My understanding is, yes,
after 8 months of Johnson fighting her bill, and after inquiries from PBS News Weekend, mHealth Fairview finally agreed to waive her balance. They also told her they've decided to reduce their price for allergy tests by more than 80%. As for Jess Ayers, she found she could avoid the facility fee by driving her daughter to a different clinic 40 minutes away in a far-off suburb, even though it's the same doctors and health system.
You almost had to shake your head and be like, what?
Luckily, Ayers could afford to pay her bill, but she still worries about those who are less well off and about people like her parents who live in rural northern Minnesota, a 2-hour drive from their doctors.
And there's a lot of country out there, and there are a lot of people who are further from care. And if they only have a choice to go to a facility that does charge a hospital fee, what then? How is that fair?
For PBS News Weekend, I'm Megan Thompson in Edina, Minnesota.
Last year, the Surgeon General warned that parents in the United States are overwhelmed and burned out. One group of parents is often overlooked: the 1 in 15 with disabilities. Jessica Slice became disabled years before becoming a mother. The experience, she says, prepared her for parenthood. Ali Rogan spoke with her about her new book, Unfit Parent: A Disabled Mother Challenges an Inaccessible World. It's part of our series, Disabilities Reframed.
Jessica Slice, thank you so much for being here. You write in the very introduction of your book, disabled parents have something powerful and transformative to offer. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I think that disabled parents have been rejected by the systems that govern parenting for everyone. And from that place of rejection, we formed our own way of parenting. And I think actually that way that we formed can be an off ramp for all parents, from consumeristic parenting, from perfection driven parenting, from this sense that we should be able to willpower our kids into safety and ultimate happiness.
You spent much of your adult life, your young adult life, as a non-disabled person, and you write about that transition and what it was like for you in the book. But what wisdom and tools do you think you bring to parenting as a disabled parent, as somebody who became a parent while disabled, that you wouldn't have been equipped to hold if you were not disabled?
Yeah. So when I was in my 20s, I had this sense that happiness or perfection was just around the corner, that if I could just do things a little bit better, then I would really enjoy my life. And disability pried that perfectionism from my hands. And since becoming disabled, I'm much better at just taking my days as they are. And I know that many days will be hard for many people, and I'm able to accept that. And then I also think that being disabled taught me how to be bored. I'm very good at just sitting around all day. And I think a under acknowledged requirement for being a parent to young kids is the ability to tolerate boredom.
That is, as the parent of a toddler myself, that is very, very true. On a serious note, there are studies, there are books that you talk about, countless testimonies, many of which you write about in the book. Disabled people facing staggering discrimination when trying to become pregnant, when having a baby, and then certainly it continues once they have a baby. Can you take us through the ways that the system is designed that often fails disabled parents in this way?
Sure. I mean, this could be its own book, and I hope it is one day, but reproductive care is often inaccessible. There's many obstetricians who are unable to help physically disabled people. Many fertility clinics aren't able or unwilling to help disabled people get pregnant. In the hospital, Child Protective Services is often called after giving birth. I mean, it kind of goes on and on and on.
And what assumptions underlie that dynamic in the system? You talk a lot about this in your book.
Yeah, I think really at the bottom of that is this sense that if you need care, if you have a needy body, if you can't be completely independent, then you're unable to care for others or unable to care for a baby. And I just think that's fundamentally untrue. And I think it really hurts all parents because I think it gives non disabled people this false perception that they should be able to parent without help. And so non disabled people crumble under this unsustainable pressure, and then disabled people are kept out of the whole thing. I think we all want so desperately for our kids to be okay and for our families to be okay. And we parent with this idea that we are invincible if we only work hard enough. And admitting that disabled people exist and that we make good parents is also admitting that none of this is promised and all bodies are fragile and all bodies have needs.
You write about a discrepancy in the book that disabled people routinely report being happy at rates equal to or greater than non-disabled people. And yet most doctors who have been surveyed on this believe that disabled people have a quality of life that is less than a non-disabled person. Why is it so common for society to consider disability in this way?
It's actually called the disabled paradox. It's a philosophical phenomenon that disabled people are just far happier than anyone think. I actually joke in the book that statistically you're much more likely to be happy if you're disabled than if you're a doctor, which is unfortunately true, and they have their own rates of moral injury. But I think what's underneath it is it goes back to this fear of fragility and fear of mortality, that for many people, disability is a reminder that nothing is promised and very little is actually in our control. And we think, oh, we don't want to get anywhere close to fragility because that is terrifying. But I think once we kind of look it in the face and live with it, then we actually can live very fulfilling lives.
You write in the book about how the challenges that disabled people experience on a daily basis that really equip them with tools to be constantly creative and calm and able to adapt to change really equips them well, especially in the earliest days of parenting when things just feel completely out of one's control. Tell me more about that.
So I think there's two parts of this. One, we're afraid of disability, and in many ways, having a baby and caring for a baby is confronting disability. If you labor and are recovering, you're nearly in a weak and unpredictable body, and a baby is very, very weak and unpredictable. And then on top of that, in my experience being disabled and dealing with the daily and hourly problem solving of living in my very painful and unpredictable body, primed me and prepared me to not be totally overwhelmed caring for both my babies when they were newborn and incredibly unpredictable and incredibly needy.
Jessica Slice, author of Unfit Parent, A Disabled Mother Challenges an Inaccessible World. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. This was wonderful.
And that is PBS News Weekend for this Saturday. I'm John Yang. For all of my colleagues, thanks for joining us. Happy Passover. See you tomorrow.
Major funding for PBS News Weekend has been provided by...
In 1995, two friends set out to make wireless coverage accessible to all. With no long-term contracts, nationwide coverage, and 100% U.S.-based customer support. Consumer Cellular. Freedom calls.
Certified financial planner professionals are proud to support PBS News Weekend. CFP professionals are committed to acting in their clients' best interest. More information at letsmakeaplan.org.
The ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
You're watching PBS.